In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, but there's one place he didn't create. The Netherlands. Because the Netherlands was built by the Dutch. Welcome to the entire history of the Netherlands. Our story starts some 250,000 years ago when some bipedal monkeys decided that this was a good place to hunt and gather. This is widely considered to have been a bad move, and quite frankly it all went downhill from there. I'm actually going to skip over most of the prehistoric stuff because, let's face it, it's mind-numbingly boring. I'm sorry, but if you clicked on this video for an in-depth analysis of clay fragments from different prehistoric cultures, this might not be the video for you. The entirety of Dutch prehistory can be summed up as follows. Some guys over there moved some heavy rocks, some other guys built a road, and these guys over here figured out that if you pile enough dirt on top of itself, you get a hill. This last one is actually somewhat important, since this invention marked the first victory of the people living in these lands in the war against their ancient enemy, the sea. But we'll get back to that later. First, let's check in on the only historically significant Italians, the Romans. It's 55 BC and some guy named Julius Caesar was on a quest to make everything that wasn't Roman more Roman. He accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up in what is now the Netherlands, where he, according to the book Commentaries on the Gallic War, heroically faced an army of 430,000 Gauls. An army which he obliterated without losing a single Roman soldier. After which, the remaining Gauls, ashamed of suffering such a catastrophic defeat, committed mass suicide. Now it's important to note that this book was written by Caesar himself, so make of that what you will. Anyway, from then onwards the Romans were here to stay, occupying half of what will one day be the Netherlands. But why only half? After all, couldn't they just as easily have pushed on a bit towards the northern coastline? Well, they most certainly could have pummeled the northern tribes into submission. But why the hell would they want to do that? The River Rhine made for a very defensible border, but more importantly, there was literally nothing there. The lands were inhospitable, devoid of any natural resources, and on top of that, they would also flood whenever Jupiter left the rain on for too long. And it's not like the people living there provided anything of value either. While Rome was building the Colosseum, northern tribes like the Frisi had barely figured out how to bang rocks together. Anyway, for the next couple of hundred years, nothing too special happens. The Romans built camps and settlements which slowly grew into the first Dutch cities. This is Roman Emperor Constantine, who decided that this Jesus fella was actually a pretty cool guy, which led to Christianity slowly making its way into the Roman parts of the Netherlands. In the meantime, the Frisi, those barbarians living in the inhospitable flood-prone marshes north of the Rhine, they just kinda disappeared. Remember these artificial hills I talked about earlier? Yeah, turns out these hills don't work all too well when sea levels suddenly rise by a lot. Which is exactly what happened around the year 300. Bye bye Frisi. So there's a reason the Dutch don't speak Latin anymore. Rome falls, togas fall out of fashion, so now we all have to wear pants again. Meanwhile, groups of Germanic peoples settled in the north. This means, as much as it pains me to say this, that whenever people refer to the Dutch as swamp Germans, they're technically right. Anyway, these Germanic peoples decide to call themselves Frisians as a nod to the now extinct Frisi, and almost immediately got into a fight with the other early medieval kingdom dominating the region at the time, the Franks. Now what you need to know is that the Franks were Christians, whereas the Frisians still worshipped pagan gods. And if there's one thing the Catholic Church hates more than heresy or the Age of Consent, it's pagans. So the popes had missionaries with the goal of Christianizing these lands. First bishop of Frisia was this guy, Willibrord. Why is it interesting? Well, he reigned from and built his abbey in the city of Utrecht, which wasn't Frisian. You see, missionaries don't tend to be very effective when there's a kill-on-sight policy against them. Needless to say, the Frisians weren't all too keen on this Jesus fella, which tends to happen when the kingdom that's trying to convert you is also actively pillaging your villages. Anyway, the Franks eventually pummeled the Frisians into submission, and now everybody loves Jesus. A couple of decades later, the Frankish Empire splits up, with one half becoming France and the other half becoming the Germanic Vasterklag, better known as the Holy Roman Empire. Moving ahead a bit, welcome to the 9th and 10th centuries. The lowlands were thriving. They had become one of the most important trade hubs of the region, and their coins can be found all over the old world. So viewer, have you ever drank a soda outside during summer only to be assaulted by an endless barrage of wasps? Well, that's kind of what the lowlands were like during the 9th and 10th centuries. But instead of soda, it's money, and instead of wasps, it's Vikings. Yeah, if you lived near any body of water that was connected to the sea, which was literally everywhere, you were at risk of having your booty raided by some bored Scandinavian in more ways than one. Moving on, the Holy Roman Empire was about as stable as a girl studying psychology, which meant that the various kingdoms and states of the lowlands were at liberty to do whatever the hell they wanted. And what happens when you let states do whatever the hell they want? War. It's always war. Anyway, bunch of Game of Thrones shit happens, and from the ashes of these wars rose one state as the clear victor, the County of Holland. In the meantime, some religious incel scribbles a complaint about not being able to get laid on a piece of paper. This is the oldest known instance of the Dutch language. Also around the same time, the war against the ancient enemy, the water, entered into a new phase with wins and losses on both sides. Land reclamation turned the vast inhospitable boglands into fertile agricultural ground, while a gigantic flood forced the Frisians in the north to take inspiration from a certain American politician and build the walls to prevent the Haitian water from eating all their cats and dogs. These walls were the first dikes. But the war wasn't won. At the end of the 12th century, the water struck back with a series of devastating floods that killed thousands and ruined a lot of the reclamation efforts. Before we continue, let me tell you some fun facts about water. Fun fact number 1, it's liquid. Fun fact number 2, there's a lot of it. Fun fact number 3, if you are underwater for a prolonged period of time, you drown. Fun fact number 4, drowning is usually fatal. When given the choice between drowning and not drowning, most people will choose not to drown. So something had to be done. The water was everybody's enemy, and only through cooperation and coordinated effort was there a chance of survival. That's why the drainage boards, or heemraadschappen, were established. These boards didn't just fight against the water, they also functioned a bit like municipalities. Why should you care? Well, these institutions were the first actually democratic institutions in Europe. You didn't have to be a noble to vote or get elected. Everybody could. The only requirement was that you had to own land in the relevant area and also have a penis. But still, suck it, America, with your quote-unquote democracy. Just kidding, we actually rely heavily on American military support due to decades of systemic mismanagement of the Dutch military. Anyway, guarded by the drainage boards, the lowlands entered a period of economic growth. But were the Netherlands even a coherent entity? Yes, said the House of Burgundy, who, through inbreeding, intermarriage, gained control of these 17 provinces. The 17 provinces of the Netherlands. Everything's great, and I sure hope nobody posts 95 reasons why the Catholic Church sucks on the door of a German university. Oh, well, at least we're ruled by the House of Burgundy, and not by Spanish Habsburgs. Kutzooi! Yup, the 17 provinces of the Netherlands were now under direct Spanish rule. And just like they did with South America, they ruined everything. While the previous rulers, the House of Burgundy, were more laissez-faire when it came to ruling, the Spanish weren't. Protestantism, especially a kind of Protestantism named Calvinism, became increasingly popular among people all over the 17 provinces. And the extremely Catholic Spanish didn't like that one bit. Remember earlier when I said that there are 3 things the Catholic Church hates: pagans, the age of consent, and heresy. And Protestantism, well, that's about the most heretical thing there is. And how do you deal with heresy?
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
I know, we were all expecting it. Memes aside, these inquisitors actually believed that they were doing a good thing. They believed that by burning people alive, they cleansed their souls, allowing them to go to heaven instead of spending an eternity in hell. But you can only hold a human barbecue with religious undertones for so long before people start complaining. And complain they did. Loudly. In 1566, Calvinist mobs stormed Catholic churches and cathedrals all over the Netherlands. Every statue of every saint was taken down and every icon besmirched. When the Spanish king heard what happened, he sent his attack dog, the Count of Alba, to the Netherlands to give every heretic an express ticket to hell. That didn't sit too well with some of the Calvinist Dutch nobility, mainly because Alba had sentenced them to death in absentia. Most prominently, a man who took the proverb, "speaking is silver, but silence is gold," so literal it became his name. A man with, allegedly, a dick so big he needed a wheelbarrow to carry it around. A man who didn't even speak Dutch. I am of course talking about the one, the only, the father of the fatherland, William of Orange. William had rallied an army and in 1568 launched an invasion to liberate the Netherlands from Spanish rule. He failed. Miserably. He tried again in 1572, this time with more success. Together with exiled nobles turned pirates called the Seabaggers, he managed to capture a lot of towns and villages along the coast and the major rivers. Unlike your mum, Alba didn't take that lying down. He cut a bloody swath through the Netherlands, pillaging every city he came across and murdering thousands. And then the Spanish ran out of money. Their troops, which were mercenaries, decided to get their payment some other way. So the Spanish had to pull out and wanted to sue for peace. So, William, we cool now? The fuck we are? Excuse me? Here's a piece of paper spelling it out for you. With the Union of Utrecht, the 7 rebellious Protestant provinces formally united. Their first act, sending the Spanish king a declaration of independence. The Dutch Republic was born. But wait a second, weren't there 17 provinces? Yes, there were. The non-Protestant provinces liked the taste of Habsburg cock too much and preferred Spanish bootlicking over freedom. These provinces would later be known as Belgium. So the Dutch Republic was at war with one of the largest empires the world had ever seen for 80 years. There must have been an enormous strain on their economy. No, quite the opposite actually. While the war would bankrupt Spain, the Netherlands was doing just fine. More than fine actually. From 1588 onwards, the Dutch were making so much money, so much gold, that one could name an age after it. A golden age, if you will. Yep, the Dutch were finally doing what they were good at. Trade. The nascent Dutch Republic was also very religiously tolerant, for the time, and therefore became a safe haven for religious minorities. Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, who cares? As long as you paid your taxes, the Dutch certainly didn't. The only thing the Dutch cared about was money. And boy did the Dutch Republic love money. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company, pillaged half of Asia and traded with the other half. There was also the West India Company, which owned some islands in the Caribbean and did a different kind of trading. Apart from enslaving countless African people, they also established a small fur trading colony on an island in North America, which the natives called Manhattan or something. But that was traded for the entire country of Suriname. It was a great deal, because let's face it, that island would have never amounted to anything. So what did we do with Suriname? Slave plantations mostly. But contrary to popular belief, these faraway colonies, like Suriname, the islands in the Caribbean and the Dutch East Indies, weren't the reason this age would later be known as the Golden Age. Most trade happened with places in Europe, mostly Poland, Scandinavia, Russia and the Baltics. The Dutch had such an iron grip on European trade. Out of all the trade in Europe, the Dutch did half. All was well for the Dutch Republic. That is until 1672, when shit hit the fan so hard we ate our Prime Minister and his brother. Honestly, that year wasn't even shit hitting a fan anymore. It was more just a giant perpetual flurry of excrement. Everybody declared war on the Republic and everything that could go wrong went wrong. One of my first ever videos is on that subject if you want to know more. After that disastrous year of 1672, the Dutch Republic went on a steady decline. Both the East and the West India Company went bankrupt and the iron grip on trade in Europe was lost.
You're broke! You're fucking poor!
Skipping ahead a bit, it's now the second half of the 18th century and the country was divided into two blocks, the Orangists and the Patriots. What you need to know is that the Dutch Republic, as a republic, didn't have a king. Rather, they had a stadhouder, which was basically a king, but with a different name, so that's why it's totally different. Now the Patriots wanted the stadhouder gone. On the other hand, you had the Orangists, who wanted to give them even more power. This led to our very own French-style revolution, apart from the fact that it was nowhere near as spectacular or successful. In fact, the Germans invaded and put an end to all the shenanigans. In the meantime, the French nobility got a bit too ahead of themselves. And 6 years later, the French army appeared on the southern border.
Knock knock it les France motherfuckers.
Just like Jim Henson had his fist so far up Kermit's ass that he could make him talk, the French had their fist so far up the ass of the Dutch Republic, it even changed its name. It was now the Batavian Republic. And just like fists of asses, there were some who enjoyed it. Actually, there were a lot of people who enjoyed it. Not the stadhouder though. He had to flee to England to prevent himself from ending up like his French colleague. But yeah, the Batavian Republic actually enjoyed widespread support among the populace. Everything was going pretty okay until some Corsican general, who was actually average height for the time, decided that the Dutch shouldn't have too much fun and replaced the popular government with his own brother, who was actually a pretty decent guy and became somewhat popular as well. Napoleon, seething at the thought of the Dutch having benevolent leadership, forced his brother to abdicate and just annexed everything instead. In 1815, Napoleon listened to the hit ABBA song Waterloo and liked it so much he decided to name a battle after it, which he lost. But what to do with this newly liberated land? I know, said the British. Let's use it to fuck with France. And so the Kingdom of the Netherlands was born, with King William as its first king, comprising not only of the old Dutch Republic, but also the Austrian Netherlands, aka Belgium, and Luxembourg. My king, the Belgians, they're revolting. I know they are, Jan. What's new? They're also planning a revolution. The idea of Dutch-speaking Protestants ruling them didn't sit too well with the Catholic and mostly French-speaking Belgians, so they had a revolution, which was a success. The Netherlands was now comprised of these 11 provinces. Skipping ahead a bit, it's now 1848 and the entirety of Europe is on fire. Popular revolutions are breaking out everywhere, and King William II was scared that the angry peasant mobs might want to decorate the pike with his head. So he gave some nerd the power to write a constitution that would change the kingdom into a constitutional monarchy. Democracy, baby. But it really wasn't that democratic. You could only vote if you were male and paid taxes. Small problem, only the very rich could afford to pay taxes. This made the Liberal Party extremely popular. What was the Liberal Party all about? Freedom. Mainly freedom to pay your workers as little as you wanted. And the freedom to use child labor. After all, doesn't the existence of Minecraft prove that the children yearn for the mines? But there was some who didn't really agree with the whole child labor stuff. Those were the socialists. But nobody listens to them. No, the actual opposition came from a group also hated by the socialists. The Christians. You see, the Christian faith has this book called the Bible, and after going through its entirety, page by page, it turns out I can't read. But I have been told that the Bible says some stuff about how caring for your fellow man is a good thing. And it just so happened that the Netherlands was at that point still a very religious country. Everybody went to church regardless of social class, and it was through these churches and through the Christian democratic political parties that suffrage was expanded and child labor abolished. Skipping to 1914, some guy shot some other guy in the Balkans and now the world is on fire. Not my problem, said the Dutch. And miraculously, it worked. While Belgium was destroyed to the point they still haven't fixed it to this day, the Netherlands remained neutral. We even allowed the German Kaiser to live here in exile after everything was over. Then some loudmouth art school reject became very popular in Germany. It's gonna be fine, said the Dutch government. We'll just stay neutral, like last time. Yeah, the Dutch army didn't even last a week and the city of Rotterdam was reduced to rubble. In the meantime, the Japanese blitzed the Dutch East Indies and the Queen had to flee to England. Life under German occupation sucked. Not as much as in Eastern Europe, since the Germans saw us essentially as swamp Germans with a speech deficiency, but still, it sucked. Especially if you belong to one of these groups. The biggest allied fuck-up of the war also happened in the Netherlands when brain-damaged Montgomery decided to send unsupported paratroopers right into the clutches of a fuck ton of well-prepared Germans. In the meantime, a Jewish girl named Anne Frank wrote about her experiences of the war in her diary, which after her death in concentration camp Bergen-Belsen would become one of the best-selling books ever written. Anne Frank was one of the more than 110,000 Dutch people murdered during the Holocaust. To this day you can see their names on these stones that are scattered around every Dutch city. Anyway, Hitler makes his only good painting on the wall of the Fuhrer bunker and now the Netherlands is free once more. So, Netherlands, now that you're liberated, maybe you can grant us independence? Said some guys from the East Indies. Fuck no, said the Dutch government, who immediately sent in the entire army to commit atrocities. That didn't sit too well with the Americans, who threatened to do the only thing that will make the Dutch listen. They threatened to stop sending money. It worked, and in 1949 the state of Indonesia was born. However, the Netherlands didn't just lose land, they also gained some. With the completion of the Afsluitdijk in 1932, this piece of ocean suddenly wasn't ocean anymore. It was free real estate. More than 1,400 square kilometers of land were reclaimed from the ocean floor. And in 1986, this land officially became the 12th Dutch province. Sure, having a sunken city like Atlantis is cool and all. You know what's cooler? Having cities rise from the ocean floor. Apart from creating new land, there were also some other developments. Honestly, it's kinda boring, but I do have to mention them. The Netherlands was a founding member of a lot of important international groups like the EU, UN, NATO, etc, etc. It was the first country to decriminalize the use of marijuana and the first to legalize gay marriage. When the Americans invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, the Dutch also went in guns blazing, and currently we have China by the balls while having a monopoly on the machines that manufacture chips. So that's cool, I guess. Congratulations on making it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, yada yada yada, you know the drill. Also, I have a second channel where I upload everything that doesn't fit the mold of this channel, so check it out if you want to be disappointed.